The law serves the promise, and the promise glorifies the law. This is the apparent contradiction that we have within our faith, within Christianity, and yet it is at the heart of the Christian faith. God has handed down the law, and so he expects us to live in obedience to the law. And yet, we're also supposed to live by grace according to the promise and the free gift of salvation that he offers us. And when you put those two together side by side, it really seems like it's contradictory. But this apparent contradiction is the heart of Christianity, because they aren't contradictory. And in fact, they're found in the very nature of who God is. What Paul is arguing for here in Galatians chapter 3 actually proceeds from the nature of God. It's out of God's nature that we can have both law and grace, and they don't contradict each other. Let me show you how this works. I think the best way for me to be able to show you this is to take you back into the Old Testament again, into the book of Exodus. At the end of Exodus chapter 33, Moses is up on Mount Sinai, and he says to God, "Please show me your glory." Now, many of you are already familiar with this story. And God said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord, Yahweh, I am." So he puts Moses in the cleft of the rock and then passes by, proclaiming all of what he just says there on the screen. Now, this is really, really interesting and really easy to miss, so hopefully we won't miss it. Moses says, "Show me your glory." God says, "I'll show you all my goodness." And then he declares his name as well. And what this shows us is that those three things, glory, goodness, and the name of God, are all synonyms for each other. They all mean the exact same thing. See, when Moses says, "Show me your glory," what he's asking God is, show me what is the ultimate of you. What are you ultimately, God? What makes you, you, God? That's what he's saying. I want to see that. And God says, "Okay, I'll display my goodness. That's the ultimate, and I'll tell you who I am." That also is the ultimate. That's the ultimate of what makes me, me, says God, his goodness and his name. Because when God proclaims his name, he uses "I am" at the burning bush for the very first time, Yahweh, for the very first time in the burning bush. And the reason why he does that is because there are no categories for God. There's no way to put him into a category. And the only way that we can define God then is to compare him to himself, because there are no other categories that could possibly describe him. So he says, "I am who I am," to Moses at the burning bush. And that's why his name there is listed. He says, "I'll show you who I am by telling you my name again." And when God proclaims his goodness, there also is nothing to compare his goodness to. It's completely and uniquely his goodness. It's complete goodness. And not only is it complete goodness, because we think of goodness as actions that we do, but that's not how God's goodness works at all. God's goodness is an essential part of his character. It's who he is. He is good in his very nature. And so his glory then is who he is, his goodness and his name, his identity, his being. So God comes to Moses and he says, "I'm going to show you all my goodness." And so he stuffs Moses into a cleft in the rock and he passes by, right? And then he says something as he's passing by. There's this thing that God says as he's passing by, and it seems totally contradictory from our perspective. He says this in verse 6. "The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Okay, so far, so good. Like, this is the stuff that we expect to see when God talks about his goodness, right? But he goes on. But who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. Now, when you read all of that together, you go, there's a contradiction here, right? I mean, it sounds like God is saying, I'm a forgiving God who never forgives. Huh? I mean, does that make any sense? Not from our perspective, because we think either you're forgiving or you're not. What he's showing us is that law and love don't take a back seat to each other. Like, these two ideas have to be held in tension. I have steadfast love, which forgives. But every sin has to be punished. I won't clear it. It will be punished. See, we go, in terms of our humanness, we all go to one side or the other. All of us do. Maybe it was how we were raised, or maybe it's just our essential, just kind of how our heart is made up. But we're either very forgiving, and we all, well, not all, those of us that are forgiving, we fall to that side. Every time there's a conflict or an issue, we'll fall to that side. Or we're too legalistic, right? All of us fall into one of those two camps. There are no exceptions to this, humanly speaking, of us. This is just how it works out. On one side, if a person is just, if they absolutely do right, no matter what, we say that's an expression of goodness. They always do the right thing. That's an expression of goodness. Good people are consistent. Good people are just. Right? On the other hand, someone will say, well, forgiveness is what it is to be good. If you forgive, you say, oh, let's let it go, no sweat. I understand you screwed up. Let's let bygones be bygones. Let's try again. That also is an expression of goodness. Good people reconcile. Both are true. Good people hold people accountable and are just, and good people forgive. Both are true. That's actually the nature of the conflict that's going on in Minnesota. I don't know if that's how it started out, but that's what it's become. We've got people holding people accountable, and we've got people saying, let's just forgive them. And now we're at war with each other over this issue, this division within ourselves. Are we good because we forgive, or are we good because we hold people accountable? But God says, I'm both. Both are true in me, says God. You won't really see my glory. You won't even fathom who I am unless you sense that these two ideas are absolutely and intrinsically linked together in my character, in who I am. Law and love working together and being reconciled together. Neither giving way to the other. Neither ideal more God or less God. Together they make up the goodness and glory of who God is. And until you see that, you haven't seen who God really is. We hear all the time, oh, Christians, you're supposed to forgive, as though justice isn't a part of the equation. God is just. He holds people accountable. He says, I'm not ever going to forgive. To the third and fourth generation, I'm going to hold you accountable to this sin. Right? But also on the other side of it, we can't say, oh, it's all about justice. Because God does forgive. Now, I think what Paul is saying in chapter 3, if we get back to Galatians now, is that only in the gospel do those two ideas ultimately come together. The justice and love of God come together through the substitutionary atonement of Christ. On the cross, and only on the cross, do the love of God and the standards of justice of God perfectly and brilliantly align, and they do so for a singular purpose. Paul says in Romans chapter 3, verse 26, so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Do you see both justice and forgiving love are represented in that sentence? It's absolute genius, really, when you think about it. Both love and law have triumphed at the cross. Together, in the same way, at the same time, they've triumphed. The one has not given way to the other. Each has kept its ground. More than that, more than just keeping their ground, each emerges victoriously honored, victoriously glorified at the cross.